Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are located. I'm Alexandra Malloy, and I'm Chair of Women Road Safety Network. I really would like to start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, so the traditional custodians of the land in which we gather today, but also acknowledge the people, traditional owners of the land where you join in today. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend the respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people joining us today. This is a great opportunity today for having a little bit more informal chat, but also our final event for this year. So open microphone, where we will be able to share some insights, ask questions, and just creating that our environment to support women in road safety. And thank you so much for joining today. I'll pass it to our events chair, and Andrea, and she will loop you in for the next steps.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Alexandra. Today's session is open mic, so we can all discuss or contribute to the ongoing road safety conversation. Our question today from one of our attendees is, what are the typical behavioural differences observed between men and women in driving skill while responding to any events? That's a very broad question, and I would invite you all to put up your hand, and I'd love to hear some feedback from you. Catherine?
Well, my answer will be based on my observations and opinion, not research. But I would suggest risk taking is obviously been widely acknowledged as being an issue for men, particularly young men. I would say there's probably patience is an issue, and ego is a bit of an issue, just based on the people we see come through here, and we have thousands of students come through here a year. But that's, yeah, as I said, that's not research based. That's based on my own observations. And I think, generally speaking, women are more patient, generally speaking.
All right. I did I did jump the gun there, but thank you, Catherine. I should have asked us all to introduce ourselves.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. It was my new girl pants on here. I should have asked everyone to introduce themselves and what they're working on in road safety. So, Catherine, while you're on screen, please introduce yourself and your role.
Oh, thank you. Catherine Collier, I'm the manager at METEC Driver Training, also known as Metropolitan Traffic Education Centre. We're based in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and we have a driver training facility that we mostly use to host students, secondary school students, in their first driving experience. And we pair that with road safety education. Excuse me, in the classroom, and we try and instill some good foundation skill and knowledge in them when they're here. Apart from that, we do other training in terms of caravans and so forth, but primarily students, young people are our core purpose.
All right, thank you so much. Annalise Mortimer.
Hello, nice to see some familiar faces that I met at the conference. I'm Annalise Mortimer. I'm the Director of Program Governance, Performance and Coordination at Transport for New South Wales. So I administer and program manage the road infrastructure programs within New South Wales. So primarily, I look after the metropolitan councils within New South Wales, so working with them to deliver a lot of their local government infrastructure programs. Nice to meet everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. Sean.
Hi everyone, I'm Sian Koppel. I'm an Associate Professor at the Monash University Accident Research Centre, where I lead the Behavioural Science team. I have the pleasure of serving on the Women in Road Safety Network Committee. It's one of the thrills of my career. I also serve as an Executive Council member for the Australasian College of Road Safety, and I'm currently President-elect for the Association for the Advancement of Automotive Medicine. Everyone needs to get much shorter titles or acronyms. So welcome everyone, and glad to see you all.
All right. Jo Bennett.
Hi everybody, I'm Dr. Jo Bennett. I'm from a senior lecturer at the Australian Catholic University based in Sydney. I'm on the Early Career Network Committee for the ACRS, and I'm also doing a lot of research in vulnerable road users. So I've got a couple of different projects going at the moment, one in older adult pedestrians, one in older adults transitioning away from driving retirement, and also one in looking at improving outcomes for young Indigenous drivers.
Fabulous. Hannah.
I'm actually going to speak on behalf of Hannah. She can't actually turn her sound on at the moment. So I'm Kerry Armstrong. I'm the director of the Mace UniSC Road Safety Research Collaboration here on the beautiful Sunshine Coast in Queensland. And Hannah is, so Dr. Hannah Watling is a research associate here in the centre as well, but she's also a committee member for the Women in Road Safety Network organisation, this one here. And we're also to the sponsors of the scholarship, the annual scholarship that, you know, is for the that happens at the conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Kathy Ducouris.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Ducouris. I work for a road safety consultancy called Safe System Solutions, and I primarily look after road safety technical training for practitioners in local government, state road agencies and consultants and that sort of thing. So it's really about the application of all the great research and everything that's done and how we apply it in practice. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Catherine because my son went to your training this week.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
So, yes, it was funny when you said METEC. I'm like, hang on, that's where he went. So he did 2 days of driver's ed training there.
Oh, wonderful.
So
what school is he with?
Alphington Grammar. So,
Fantastic.
yeah, it was a great couple of days and really valuable. So it was, and it saves me from doing those first few hours of learner driver training. So thanks very much.
We try and remove some stress for parents.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Dolma. Can you unmute Dolma? Hello. We're having a technical issue with Dolma, I think. All right, we'll wait for that. Jasmine Proud.
Hi, I'm Jazz, and I'm with the Monash University Accident Research Centre as well with Sian. Sian's my supervisor. I'm a research fellow there, and I do a lot of crash statistics and also work in heavy vehicles and emergency services vehicles as well. And yeah, so data science and research.
Welcome, thank you. Naomi? Hello, Naomi.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm a traffic engineer with an interest in road safety. Been working at different councils and Department of Transport, currently on a break. Did a master's at Monash Uni in Accident Research Centre, looking at side impact vehicle crashes and leg injuries, and just a road safety advocate.
Thank you. Philippa? Hello, Philippa. No, looks like we've lost Philippa and Dolma. Naomi Cooper.
That's me. Maybe I've lost him twice. Sorry.
No,
that's right. All right. My name's Andrea Hamilton-Vaughan. I'm a member of the Women in Road Safety Network. I'm the Road Safety Officer at Orange City Council and Cabonshire Council, and I'm the Events Chair for the committee. So welcome all today. Sorry that I didn't start off with our welcome, but thank you, Catherine, for your perspective. What about Monash University Accident Research? I mean, Sian, you've done a lot of work on, I'm sure, on the differences between men and women in their driving skill and responding to events. Have you got any thoughts that you may want to share?
Sure. I think when I first started my career back in the olden days, I think that there were distinct differences between men and women and how they behaved on the road. But over the last 20 years, I think that maybe some of those differences are not so stark anymore. I really do think that we do see some of that risk-taking behaviour being undertaken by young female drivers as well. Certainly, we're starting to see some more aggressive behaviour from young women. But if we think about it from a neurodevelopment or a psychophysiological perspective, we do know that the frontal lobe does develop later, it matures later in males. And so some of those skills in the frontal lobe or our executive function, you know, there in terms of goal-oriented behaviour, impulse control, they are still evident. But it's interesting to sort of think about gender and sex with a different lens now in terms of where everyone sort of sits on the spectrum. So maybe rather than thinking about binary like male and female, maybe we need to really think about it more in terms of cultural and or developmental perspectives rather than just talking about male versus female behaviour. That's sort of where my head's at the moment.
Okay. I must admit I agree that the stark differences have narrowed, I think, in my experience. Kerry Armstrong, you've worked in that field for quite some time now. Would you like to share your views on the differences?
Sure. So we've done a lot of work actually looking specifically at women, not necessarily the comparison with men. And the reason for that is that in a lot of cases, we particularly focus on impaired driving as well. So in a lot of cases, what ends up happening is that men actually end up swamping the data, for example. So if you were just doing simple comparisons, you wouldn't see much when you're actually sort of trying to examine women, because the men just take up too much of the data and they take up too much of the variance. So what we've actually done is we've really focused in on looking at women and their unique experiences in the judicial system and what it's like for them when they've, you know, gone through apprehension for drink or drug driving. And we actually see a lot of things that are tied back to things like trauma. You know, again, domestic violence, substance use that's occurring as a result of, you know, psychosocial, you know, issues going on in their lives and things like this. So again, we wouldn't see any of that necessarily if we were just focusing in on a simple comparison. So that's sort of the value of our work in this space. Again, trying to recognize that while women may not make up the same numbers, they're just as important, but you can't look at everything as a one size sorts of fits all approach. Yeah, because again, I guess, you know, just like what everybody sort of said here too, is, you know, it just gets overwhelmed too with particularly like young male drivers and things like this, because that's been a very big focus for many years in road safety space.
Can I put it to our participants that as women have become more empowered in their work life and their personal lives, could that be a negative in the driving space? In other words, can that empowerment be a, not make them more aggressive, but I think you might try to work out what I'm trying to say. Is that one of the problems?
Can I just quickly jump in there? And so I just wanted to go back to quick point. So Dolma Nagy, so she also has some issues with this microphone. So I'll just present on her behalf. So she's a safety planner, road safety planner with Transport for New South Wales, and also traffic engineer at Northern Beaches Council in Sydney, New South Wales. So that's a quick intro. And just to add on the points of the previous questions, so, and I totally agree with both Sean and Kerry and others. It's interesting, the developmental part and other factors that influence like their behavior on the roads. So it's very, very interesting to observe from some studies that I've done in the past, mostly on speed management and speed and behavior. So I still see the trend, of course, and an interesting case of differences between that part. Young males, especially. So I'm doing the research with young drivers and potential the effect on that, but they still tend to take more risks. And interestingly, if they drive with a female counterpart in the car, they will be driving with like less speeding, but if they travel in with a male counterpart, they will be more likely to do even more speeding and take more risky behavior. So that's some interesting trends there. I thought I'll throw it here.
Thank you. Jo Bennett, you've done work in this field also. What's your take on the differences, and do you find that those differences are diminishing?
Yeah, so my work's predominantly been in the older adult space. And we know that especially as we're aging, for women, there's increased risks at different points, and for men at different points as well. So I think one of the biggest trends that we're seeing in the aging space is that there are an increased number of older women now being in the driving category. So in previous generations, older women were less represented as drivers because the male typically was the driver in the family. And so we are seeing as especially as the baby boomer cohort sort of moves into that older adult category of drivers, there are a lot more older women drivers on the road. And so whether the differences between males and females, if they exist, or what the spectrum of that is something that needs more research, I think, done as we move forward, as we have more older women in that older driver cohort. And so I think that's something that we don't know enough about yet, because we've got this sort of generational shift occurring, demographic shift occurring in that space. I do think, though, based off some of the work done in the younger driver space in particular, that gap is narrowing. And so the differences in behaviour and the way that younger women and younger men engage that gap between them is definitely narrowing from a psychological kind of standpoint.
That's very interesting. Has anyone else got something they'd like to add? What about Kathy? In your Safe Systems portfolio, what do you see, or what's your take on the differences between men and women and the narrowing of their behaviours?
I wouldn't say I'm strong in this particular area. I guess in terms of the people that we train is still very much predominantly male. So the engineers and the planners and the road safety officers and all those people, it's probably sort of 80% male to 20% female. So very much the roads are still being designed and maintained and organised and planned and everything predominantly by males. So I guess that's the bit I can add to that part of the conversation.
Thank you. Annalise, Transport for New South Wales, I mean, one of the largest agencies in Australia. What kind of view do you bring to the conversation about the differences between males and females and the changes?
So I was just going to make a comment. On Sunday, I actually attended the World Day of Remembrance for Traffic Victims, the New South Wales event. And for me, it was quite a stark in your face how many young male young male victims were represented at that forum. So a lot of the families that I was engaging with, a lot of the families there, the images there, they were all young male drivers that had been, victims of road trauma. So that's just an observation from a recent event that I had from Sunday that was really confronting for me. There wasn't a lot of, whether it was just, how it was represented at the event, but there wasn't a lot of young females represented in the images. It was predominantly males. Now, in the infrastructure space, obviously it's a different sort of area that I'm working in the delivery. But I guess just an observation is it's really encouraging for me to see, particularly with working with councils from the traffic engineering perspective, is the uptake of females coming up into that area and having a level of influence around the safe systems approach for how we are designing. So typically I've been working in this role for 12 years now, is that predominantly that has been male and engineers in that space, and it's very much been a male dominated environment. So I think it's really interesting that network is expanding in the traffic engineering space.
Okay, thank you. In the area of behavioural change between male and females, do you feel that we are identifying a distinct value proposition to change the behaviour of young male drivers or young female drivers? Would anyone like to tackle that? Sian, I'm sure you've got something that you could contribute.
Sure. So increasingly, I think that a lot of our interventions have been about behaviours within the vehicle, like that our behaviour suddenly changes once we're behind the wheel. And sometimes for some people it does. But I think for the majority of people, the behaviours in our life, we bring those into the vehicle. And so I think I'm increasingly thinking about road safety from a public health perspective. So starting to think about distraction and inattention. So we know that that's prevalent. Even probably on this Zoom, people are distracted by other things maybe that are coming through in terms of emails and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think that maybe some of the behavior changes that we need to do is to sort of influencing people in the broader picture. So getting people to be more mindful, thinking about what they're doing. And we know that mindfulness it can influence things like aggression, distraction, speeding, all those sorts of things. But I think we have to remember that behaviour is one really small component of the safe system. And what we need to remember is that people, even if they've got the best of intentions, they make errors. Yes. And really what we need to be doing is making sure that those other components of the safe system are working at maximum capacity so that we can protect people when they do make an error. The other thing I wanted to say, Andrea, just from a workplace perspective, the thing that I'm really noticing is that a lot of women are driving now, and that's something that was really different from when I first started my career. And I know Jazz is doing a lot of work in heavy vehicles, and I think that heavy vehicle female drivers is a really big and interesting new sort of frontier, as well as some of these new emerging sort of gig economy frontiers as well. So I think that there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think that women have unique strengths that they bring to the driving, but they also have, vulnerabilities, which we talked about at the conference in terms of more likely to sustain injuries once involved in a crash and things like that. So I think we need to think about women in a really broad context. Sorry, that's probably a really long-winded way of answering your question, Andrea.
No, but you've brought in a credible new part to the driving task. There are 40,000 women in heavy vehicles as we speak. Now, I went to my first heavy vehicle conference and I met a woman who 25, 30 years ago started driving heavy vehicles, and she was only allowed to drive at night because the company didn't want her to be seen driving a truck during the day. So boy, have we changed, but 40,000 of them. And that is a demographic that I'm sure flies under the radar of our agencies. And they don't crash like the boys. So Leslie, they're doing a good job. But yeah, you've Sian, you've really and the gig economy, you mentioned that, and I was in Canberra and they were talking about it. And one of the things that really surprised me was they don't have to, those people can go to Amazon, sign up with an ABN, and they can pick up a load of parcels and go and deliver them. But they've got to do them in a particular time. But all the checks and balances that go over our heavy vehicle drivers and our couriers and all, none of that is relative to them. And they, I can see a complete driver fatigue cohort there that is a problem. Kerry, what do you think with the older, now that more older women are, when I say older women, women are driving for work, whether they're doing outreach for health and goodness knows else what, how do you think that those differences will show up in our data as we move forward?
Here in Queensland, we've actually got a overrepresentation of older road users involved in crashes in the last couple of years. So again, part of this is sort of exploring some of that is, what sort of causes it, like, what's driving those sorts of changes? Is it just exposure, or are there other things that are happening there? So I think that's a really good question, but I don't actually have any of those answers yet. But one thing I was just wanting to comment on is going back a little bit to the young drivers, if I can. So it's a really interesting question, because I think when, we're talking about interventions and things like this, we've got to realize that, men and women are actually engaging in different behaviors for different reasons. So one of the things is, women actually, particularly around things like alcohol use and stuff like this, actually engage in a lot more peer protective strategies than men do. They actually, is that sort of looking out for your girlfriend. So if you're all out and having drinks or something, girls actually don't leave each other. They've got little systems in place. They got their $50 for the taxi, pot away, all this sort of stuff. Like, women are actually raised in that sort of sense of that, having a little bit more awareness and all this around the safety. We never found that for men. And this is work that Hannah and I and others have done, 10 plus years ago. So again, part of those interventions is about recognizing you can't have a one size fits all approach to things and why people engage in risk-taking behaviors, because it's very different. We find that young women, when we've talked, again, our focus is on impairment. So when we talk to young women, like, why are you engaging in drink driving event or something like this? It's because it's around things like safety. I actually didn't feel safe. I felt like I needed to get out of this situation. I didn't plan on doing this, but my personal safety was at threat, and I chose this as the lesser of the two options. Typically when we talk, like, I haven't done heaps with young men, but when we do talk to them, it's a bit like, I thought I'd get away with it. And particularly here in Queensland, because we've got such big regional areas, that is more pronounced. But really for young women in particular, it was very much around safety and their threats to their own personal well-being in these sorts of things. So again, if we were thinking about, interventions or anything like this for, say, young persons, and looking at differences in men and women, you can't just have a one size fits all approach as part of this, because they're actually engaging in unsafe behaviors for very different reasons, which would have to actually be part of that program, if that makes sense. So I think that's something that I sort of wanted to bring back to the conversation as well, just when we were talking about that. Yeah.
Because even in terms of transport options, for social activities, I mean, even Uber is a problem for young women at times. So we did have, I'm not sure if it's still around, Sheba was around for a while.
Yes.
Is that still around?
I haven't seen it for ages.
I feel like it's gone.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah. So I totally agree with you, just being around train stations, all this sort of stuff, they won't, we know not to do it. I think we all instinctively know not to do that. It does actually bring me to one thing about the older drivers that I've just remembered, and thank you, Catherine, because you've just actually reminded me of it, saying that, is when I was at TMR, we were investigating, some of the reasons people hold on to their driver license, when they're, getting older. And again, it was because of safety. Again, there's these things about safety, but that wasn't necessarily, a split between men and women necessarily feeling more unsafe. But again, it brought into this like safety element. So I think we can never underestimate the reasons why people may do particular things is around like, their socialization of safety in the first place, but then also to their, their understanding of their context around them, which is broader in a lot of cases than just actually driving a vehicle.
And I think in terms of the older baby boomers, I've recently done a couple of presentations to older drivers group, women's groups, and a lot of them, or I say a lot of them, a number of them have returned to driving after their husband doing most of the driving for a long time. So they're almost like new drivers again. So having strategies in place for them, whereas probably with the younger cohort coming through, baby boomers and the next gens, that's probably not going to be as pronounced. I think they probably will be driving more continuously rather than, having those big breaks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And unfortunately, I was a witness of one of the accident last week, just in front of me. So my car was behind the car. So, well, luckily it wasn't mine. But there were two old ladies who collided, and they remained alive, where one lady didn't stop at the stop sign, and potentially she was probably around 85 years old. She probably even maybe didn't see that sign for whatever reasons. And, so definitely, you can't just say that that was potentially intentionally in that sense. That would be different to any kind of other situation that would happen the same for example, with the younger people, but that remains reality. And, that combination to that behavior, to many unknown things, to their still unsafe systems, and that kind of approach. But what I was thinking, there are 2 points. So I wanted to come back as well to the point of the female and even their licensing. And Catherine and everyone, please jump into the discussion. So I've seen an episode in news when there were a talk that some women do not feel comfortable having a trainer and a male instructor. So they would prefer a female road instructor, again, for those various reasons. They would feel safer to and just more kind of open to that training. And sometimes it's a cultural issue as well. So they will just not simply accept that kind of fact. And there was the information that there is more actually female instructors now as well. And some schools have the choice where, that young females, or sometimes even just at different age, when they just transition into our Australian licensing system. I think that's very, very highly important. That kind of brings to the point. Yeah. And another point, of course, we all drive, or we have this training based on the experiences that we have, right? So whether our parents or our peers or some other instructors, and how and where, and let's face it, so of course every state has some different kind of requirements as well. So many challenges, of course, and there is no one solution to fit all, that's for sure, but that's very essential that we look at those aspects both when we train, when we license, when we do the behavioral programs, and so on and so forth. So definitely appreciate these different changes and provide that choice. Yeah, provide those options for them.
Yeah, we have a number of female instructors, but I would love to have more. And I think primarily the reason behind the rise in female instructors is because it's quite difficult for young driver trainers to earn enough income to support the cost of living today. And if they've got a mortgage and a significant mortgage, it's very difficult to earn enough money, providing driver training as the primary source of income into the household. Whereas, we have a lot of our instructors are older instructors that probably, well, they've been doing it for a long time, and they probably don't have the same obligations financially to contribute to the household. So yeah, we would definitely love more female instructors, because we often do get requests for them, and like today we've got a girls' school here today, so I like to have as many females here as possible. And also I think often, and this is, but often in a two household income, the female of the household, or the one that's less likely to be working the big job of the family, if you like. So they might be doing the majority of the caregiving, they might work part-time, and it is an occupation where you can work to the hours that work for you. So yeah, it'll be interesting moving forward now that having a $500,000 or $600,000 mortgage is the norm. Back to 20 years ago, when you could buy a house for 150,000 or something.
I've done so much of my research in older drivers, and I have to say that I think that we have a cognitive bias. So when there's a crash that is an older person, we take much more notice of it, or a younger person. But if the same crashes were occurring, and they do occur, like people not stopping at a stop sign, or people reversing accidentally, if that was a middle-aged person, no one would really talk about the age of that person at all. All of the evidence shows that most older drivers are really safe. They're very mindful, and they value their mobility. It is a small proportion, and you could say that of all ages in terms of medical conditions. We need to get much better at identifying people who are not fit to drive, regardless of age. So that's all I have to say about that. But I just think that the media absolutely talk about older people all of the time, but all of the evaluation that we've done here in Australia has not showed that any policies that are age-related, they don't get unsafe people off the road. They just unnecessarily make it really hard for older people to connect with community services, things like that.
In all the research that I've done, which has largely been around that cognitive function, we find that it's actually cognitive function that is a better predictor of performance over and above anything to do with age, and that you can have the same pattern of relationship between cognitive performance and driving outcomes in young people, middle adulthood, and older adulthood. And so really it is kind of the way your brain is processing the information that when you're driving, that is a better determinant of your safety than your age. And so to Sian's point, and to what you were saying, it's when people have a situation like a stroke that may impact on their cognitive capacity to drive safely, it requires more detailed sort of assessment of their cognitive fitness to drive, and the other, physical health and visual factors that go into their capacity to drive, more so than just saying, oh, you're over 75, you shouldn't be driving, or you've got to go for this assessment. But I think, having a more detailed assessment approach to people when they've had impacts on their cognitive function, like a stroke, is something that we really don't do well enough, I think. And medical practitioners, even in the fitness to guide guidelines that they're given, they say, oh, you should test, you should check for insight, you should check for executive function, you should check for attention ability, you should check for these things, but they don't tell them how, and they don't tell them what is a safe score. So what is the level of attention that is safe to drive, or what is the level of cognitive, capacity that is associated with safe driving for people, especially when they've had, when they've had a stroke, or when they've got dementia, or when they've got some other form of cognitive impact. And I think that that's a gap that we're really missing, is that we don't arm practitioners well enough to be able to make evidence-based decisions on the factors that matter over and above age. And age is a easier one, I think, is why it's sort of chosen. Age has been chosen because it's easy. You can apply a one-size-fits-all approach because you say you're over 75, you need to go for this assessment. But it's actually not nuanced. It's not actually tapping into the people that are safe or unsafe.
Yeah, and can I just add in there as well that it also depends on the baseline and the quality of their driving at a younger age. Like if someone's a really bad driver when they're 40, chances are they're going to be terrible when they're 80. But, we had someone a couple of years ago who actually voluntarily wanted to have his driving checked by one of our trainers, and he was 95. And his driving, there was no problem with his driving. And yet, you would have people, much younger. So I think it also depends on your capacity and the quality of and standards of your driving, when you're fit and unaffected by the usual signs of aging.
I just wanted to jump in and say, with older drivers and the potential for their licenses to be taken away, and also with very young people who don't drive and can't drive because of their age, maybe an answer, Andrea, about what are you going to do about it is to ask them, what are they going to do about it? What options do people have other than driving? How can they maintain their independence in the community with other transport options? Because I think that's why people are so afraid to give up their license when they get to a certain age. Also, safety considerations, as people said earlier, but it's the loss of independence that you get, and the lack of independence that you have as a young person, because our road network is quite hostile to everyone who's not in a car. So if you're in a car, you've got your capsule. But if you're not, if you're a pedestrian, or if you're a public transport user, or if you're riding a bike, it's quite hostile to all of those people. So what options do they have to maintain their independence in the community and be able to get around?
Good points. Well done. Anyone else?
Yeah, hello everyone. So I'm so sorry I'm finally joining you with sound. We had tree loppers starting up just 5 minutes before this meeting, and I was literally sitting at my desk and it's shaking and making all sorts of noises. So I thought I'd keep myself on mute for a little while. Yeah, I wondered, I had a few thoughts, but this is sort of taking us back a little bit in the conversation. But I had when I was listening to Joe mentioning the older drivers and how we need to do a bit more in that space. I just wanted to, I guess, also highlight that there is a fair proportion of older drivers that are using cannabis, and some of them medicinally, and I think this is a space that we don't know enough about, and specifically looking at women and how they might engage with that and how that affects their driving. And the other I thought I'd just put up there as another area I think that's very important to look at when we think about women in traffic is if we want to have treatments and education. So we know so Kerry and I, we work in impaired driving. We look at substance impaired driving, and if we consider that as a risk factor, we know that among our population of offenders, when we look at the women, they tend to have a greater proportion of that population that have issues with substance use and with mental illness, and also with trauma and some domestic violence. So I think just approaching that topic or that issue from the point of intervention is also very important to know that what we have in front of us, our populations are meaningfully different if you look at men and women. So I guess that's the other thing I wanted to sort of add to to the conversation now that I can. Yeah, so many ways of looking at trying to understand women's how women differ from men, and also trying to understand how we can reach them with interventions that are tailored to their needs as well.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully we'll have some answers on the cannabis side of things in the not too distant future. So there's a study being conducted, it's just starting actually at our facility with Swinburne, so on medicinal cannabis and driving. So be interesting to see the outcome.
I was I had to deliver a presentation to what they call the Traffic Offenders Program in New South Wales, in my local area. And then when they started drug testing, we all of a sudden, instead of it all being drink drivers, that they all started turning up because they'd never been caught before. These incredible group of people, and none of them were 20-something. They were in their 40s and 50s, and they've been using cocaine, heroin. One woman was very open about her heroin use. She was quite pleased to tell me about it. And all the other drugs, and half of them I didn't even know the names of. And all these people had never been busted for drug use in their lives. But once we started drug testing on the roadside, these people were getting caught left, right and centre. And I said to them, they need to make a choice. They need to either give up driving, otherwise they're going to continue to be caught and then get themselves into very serious trouble, or give up drugs. And I didn't think any of them were going to give up drugs anytime soon, because it had been a lifetime choice. So drug driving, I suppose, will become a bigger issue than we realise, because these people have never been caught before. So, and that's not even the medical cannabis people. It was really an eye-opener to me. I couldn't believe it. Anyone else?
So what are we going to do? Yeah, what are we going to do? What are the solutions? Like, I think, so yeah, definitely, like from different perspectives and from different things, we face like so many different issues in, of course, road safety for various reasons and for various aspects. So that affect, and I think, of course, there is definitely a way to that kind of systematic approach, including, behavioral interventions, including proper training, including the systems that support their decision making and their human errors as they are, But yeah, so it's really the fundamental change is needed now if we want to have these changes in the statistics to be seen. And this is really, really sad when you see as the accidents, like you said, Andrea, or again, like I said, witness, and for you thinking like if there were just different things before, so that could be a completely different outcome. And unfortunately, we see that so difficult, regardless the age, gender, and all those sort of things. So we really understand that any mishap can happen at any stage, and of course, for example, in Canberra, so I have already identified there are some key spots where I know this is like, they have like these big roundabouts, and every time we come to this roundabout, I'm like, all right, here we go. So this is the dangerous, just like parts, so you need to be prepared. So there are some specific part of the city, or part of the region where we are that actually need a little bit more attention towards, and yeah, so I think that we need to do more, and I think the government need to support these initiatives, and the government needs to support, of course, more changes as we go ahead. And yeah, I think I'll pass it to you, Andrea, but I really would like to hear everyone's thoughts, like moving forward. What would you like to see like further, but also is there any research about women that you would like to see? Because there are some enthusiastic members here that could potentially, proceed that research. So why not?
All right, well, let's throw it back to our university academics and research giants that are among us. What research would you like to see about women in road safety or road safety use issues? Hannah, what about you?
So research, so looking at how women contribute to research rather than being the, the on-road users. I think still continuing the work on understanding the pathways and particularly how women may have those career interruptions to a greater degree, and finding experiences around that and how that's managed, and if there are resources around career paths that women perhaps aren't utilizing as much as they could to try to make an impact in the road safety arena. Are things that I thought could be useful to further explore.
Hey, Joe, are you still here? Joe Bennett? Have you got any thoughts on what particular research that we need to undertake to understand women drivers or women in the road safety space?
Yeah, I mean, I think Kerry made a really good point right from the very beginning, which is around the fact that often when we look at drivers as a holistic group, the effects that are important for women get washed out by a focus on, or by large cohorts of men. So we do need to take a more kind of direct lens focused on women and trying to understand them across the the full spectrum of the lifespan, right from when they first sort of start as road users, including when they're kids, and whether there are differences in the way that kids interact and what they're taught, because often the way that people end up driving is how they've been taught through the modeling that they've had by sitting in the vehicle of their mum and their dad and so on. So I actually think it's a whole of life approach that we need to take, but with a particular kind of, we're going to focus on specifically trying to understand that for women, as opposed to just trying to understand it and have those effects washed out in the research by the overabundance of men that's typically in this research.
Right. Kerry, would you like to follow on with that, because Joe mentioned you?
Both Kerry and Sean have had to leave.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't see that. All right.
Yeah.
Alexandra.
Yeah. Oh no, I just was saying, like, just open mic, so anyone just who want to say their final remarks, so please go ahead.
I'll jump in with something very quick. I'd like to see gender impact assessments being done in the transport network. So I guess a little bit like how you might do a traffic impact assessment or a road safety audit or something like that. How does this particular infrastructure cater for women or not cater for women, and their travel patterns and their travel needs and their safety and security needs? So that's, I guess, something that is emerging, and I'd like to sort of see some of those done, and then hopefully be able to collect that information and see how that impacts the work that we do.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Annalise?
Not really, no, thank you. I think it's been really great just to listen to the various conversations that we've had on this topic. So this is obviously my first one that I've joined. So yeah, no, I found it really great. Thank you.
It's our first time too, Annalise.
Oh, is it? Okay, no, I assumed that this was like an ongoing thing. So that's interesting.
It will be. It will be next year, but we've definitely had our training wheels on today. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you for those who joined us at the Australasian College of Road Safety Conference in Hobart at our Women in Road Safety event, which was very, very popular. And we hope to see you in Perth. please, if you've got any suggestions, if you've got any ideas, please forward them to us so we can make this a bigger and better network. I mean, I've learnt so much today, and a few things have shifted my perception. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Alexandra Malloy, who's our chair of the Women in Road Safety and keeps us on track. And I hope you all have a great Christmas and a safe Christmas at that. And is there anything anyone else would like to say?
Yeah, and thank you, Andrea, for your amazing facilitation of today's session and organization of that.